The alarm sound in the United Nations Space Command Headquarters building was not a normal alarm. It was the kind of sound that made everyone stop what they were doing and listen carefully. The red lights that flashed on the ceiling meant only one thing. A priority distress signal from deep space had arrived on Earth. Commander Teo stood inside the communication chamber on the top floor of the building. He was not human, and his appearance made many people uncomfortable when they first saw him. His skin had a blue tint to it, and his eyes were larger and darker than human eyes. His body was taller and thinner than any human, but if anyone looked carefully at his face, they could see the fear and sadness written there. This was not the face of a powerful commander. This was the face of a man who had lost everything. The communication officer, a woman named Ji-won, sat at her desk with her hands shaking slightly. She had received the distress signal less than an hour ago. The message was in the Karelian language, but the computer had translated it into English for the human officials to read. What she had read made her stomach turn. "They need our help immediately," Teo said to the small group of high officials who had gathered in the room. His voice was quiet, but everyone could hear the desperation in it. "My people are dying. The Vexthul Collective is destroying everything we have built." General Park Sung, the leader of Earth's military forces, sat across from Teo with a hard expression on his face. He was a tall man with gray hair and the look of someone who had seen many wars. "Commander, we have limited resources. We cannot simply send our military ships to fight every conflict in space. You must understand this." "This is not every conflict," Teo said, his dark eyes looking directly at General Park Sung. "The Vexthul are not like other enemies. They do not want to trade territory or make peace deals. They want to destroy my people completely. 17 of our colony worlds are gone. 17, General, and they continue to attack. My military is broken. Our ships cannot fight them anymore." The room fell silent. Everyone knew about the Karelians. They had been trading with humanity for 20 years. They had helped Earth during the Great Plague that had nearly destroyed the human population 15 years ago. They had sent medicine and knowledge that saved millions of human lives. Many people in the room remembered this. Minister Nari, who worked in the humanitarian department, spoke softly. "We do owe them something. They helped us when we needed help." "We owe them nothing," another official said sharply. His name was Director Kwan. "Helping during a plague is not the same as joining a war. If we send our military to help the Karelians, we could be starting a war with an enemy we know nothing about." Teo leaned forward in his chair. "You already know about them. I have sent you all the information. The Vexthul are brutal. They have enslaved 15 other species across dozens of worlds. They are like a storm that destroys everything in its path. If they finish with my people, they will come for Earth eventually. This is not something that will go away if you ignore it." Dr. Hae-won was a tall woman with intelligent eyes and the kind of calm manner that made people trust her. She had studied alien cultures for 30 years and had written many books about how different species could live together peacefully. She stood up from her seat at the back of the room, and everyone turned to look at her. "Commander Teo is right," she said clearly. "I have studied the Vexthul reports. They are not interested in negotiation or trade. Military reports show they have destroyed 12 entire civilizations in the last 100 years. They are what we call an existential threat. That means they are a danger that could end human civilization if they are not stopped." General Park Sung shook his head. "Doctor, that is theory. We do not know for certain that they would ever reach Earth. Space is huge. There are thousands of worlds between here and Karelian territory." "The Karelians thought they were safe too," Dr. Hae-won replied. "They had a strong culture and a peaceful way of life. They did not expect to be attacked. But the Vexthul came anyway. That is what these enemies do. They come when you do not expect them." The meeting continued for 3 more hours. Officials argued back and forth. Some wanted to send only medical help and scientists. Some wanted to send nothing at all. Some, like Dr. HFY, wanted to send the entire military. The arguments were passionate, but nothing was decided. Finally, around midnight, a vote was taken. The United Nations would send some military advisors to help the Corellians understand human fighting methods. They would also send medical supplies, food, and scientists. But they would not send a full military fleet. This was a compromise that made nobody completely happy. Teo listened to the decision with a heavy heart. He knew it was not enough to save his people, but it was more than he had expected from a species that had never fought in a real war. He understood that humans were different from Corellians. Humans had to be convinced to fight. They had to believe the fight was just before they would risk their own lives. As the meeting ended, Dr. HFY walked toward Teo in the hallway. She placed her hand on his shoulder, which was something humans did when they wanted to show friendship or sympathy. "Do not lose hope," she said. "Humans move slowly, but when we finally decide to act, we act with our entire strength. I believe we will help you more in the future. But the people need time to understand what is happening." Teo looked at this kind, human woman and felt a small spark of hope in his chest. "How much time do my people have?" he asked quietly. Dr. HFY did not have an answer to give him. They both stood there in the quiet hallway, each thinking about the war that was coming, whether Earth was ready for it or not. Outside the windows, Earth continued to turn, and somewhere far away in the darkness of space, the Vexthul Collective continued its work of destruction, unaware that the human species was beginning to wake up to a danger it had never faced before. Captain Jin Soo arrived at the Corellian space station on a cold morning in early September. He was a military officer with 20 years of experience, and his face showed the marks of a man who had seen difficult things. His gray eyes were sharp and always watching. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had made decisions that meant life or death for other people. The space station was not like anything Jin Soo had ever seen. The architecture was soft and beautiful, with curves instead of straight lines. The walls seemed to glow from inside with a gentle light. Plants grew everywhere, even though they were in space. The Corellians loved nature and brought it with them wherever they went, but now, the beauty of the station felt sad and broken. Commander Teo met Jin Soo in the main observation room. Through the windows, they could see the wreckage of Corellian ships. These ships had been destroyed by the Vexthul in recent attacks. Some of them still had smoke coming from their hulls. Jin Soo counted at least 30 destroyed ships just from where he was standing. "This is what they do," Teo said quietly. "They come fast and with great force. Our defenses cannot stop them. Our ships are not built for war. They are built for peace and trade." Jin Soo stepped closer to the window and studied the destroyed ships carefully. His military mind was already analyzing the damage patterns and the types of weapons that had been used. "Tell me everything," he said. For the next 6 hours, Teo showed Jin Soo video recordings of the battles. He showed him maps of the 17 lost colony worlds. He introduced Jin Soo to Corellian military officers who explained their fighting methods and their weapons. With each new piece of information, Jin Soo's face became darker and more serious. The Vexthul weapons were far more advanced than Jin Soo had expected. Their ships were larger and more heavily armed. Their tactics were simple but effective. They would attack suddenly with overwhelming force, and then they would land soldiers on the planets below. The Corellian people could not match this strategy. They were peaceful by nature, and even their military had been trained to fight defensively, not aggressively. One of the Corellian officers named Yong-suk played Jin Soo a video recording of a battle that had happened 2 weeks earlier. It showed Vexthul soldiers landing on a Corellian colony world. The soldiers were large and powerful, built for fighting. They moved across the planet's surface like a dark storm. Corellian defenders tried to stop them, but they were quickly defeated. Then the video showed something that made Jinsu's chest tight with anger. The Vexthul were taking prisoners. They were loading Corellian civilians, including children, into large metal containers. The video ended, but Yongsuk did not need to explain what happened to those prisoners. "They are taken to labor camps," Yongsuk said in a quiet voice, "or they are used for experiments, or they are executed. My family was on that world. I do not know if they are alive or dead." Jinsu felt the weight of this moment. This was not just a military problem that could be solved with better tactics or stronger weapons. This was a catastrophe. A civilization was being destroyed in real time, and he was watching it happen on video screens. That evening, Jinsu sent his first report back to Earth. He used language that was clear and direct. He told his superiors that limited military advisors would not save the Corellians. He told them that the Vexthul were not going to stop until they had conquered all Corellian territory. He told them that this threat was real and growing larger every day. But the response from Earth was slow. Politics moved slowly, and military decisions were made by people sitting in comfortable offices on a peaceful planet. They asked for more information. They asked for clearer evidence. They asked Jinsu to wait. 2 days later, another Corellian world fell to the Vexthul. Jinsu watched the reports come in. The planet had called for help, but there was no help that could reach it in time. The Vexthul fleet arrived, destroyed the orbital defenses, and then began the process of conquest. That night, Jinsu sat in his quarters on the space station and sent a second report. This one was different. He wrote with passion and urgency. He said that humanity faced a choice. They could help their allies now, while there was still something left to save, or they could wait and eventually face the Vexthul alone when they had conquered all the worlds around Earth. On one of the Vexthul-occupied worlds, a Corellian woman named Minra was hiding underground with a small group of resistance fighters. Minra was the sister of Commander Taio, though she did not look very much like him. She had sharper features and eyes that burned with determination. She was a soldier by training, and she had chosen to stay behind when the Vexthul conquered her world. She had chosen to fight. Minra's group lived in caves beneath the surface of the planet called Korin 7. Every day they watched Vexthul soldiers moving above them. Every day they heard the sounds of the mining machines that the Vexthul used to strip the planet of its natural resources. Every day they saw their people being taken away as prisoners. Minra had a small radio that could send encrypted messages to the Corellian command center in space. She used this radio to send information about Vexthul movements and soldier locations. She sent information about the labor camps and the prisoners being held there. She sent videos of the atrocities she had witnessed. One evening, she received a message that changed everything. The message was from Commander Teo, and it contained news that made her hands shake. "Human military force is coming," the message said. "There is hope." Minra read the message 3 times to make sure she understood it correctly. The humans were coming. The humans who had helped her people during the plague were going to help them fight the Vexthul. She showed the message to her resistance fighters, and for the first time in months, she saw something like hope in their faces. But hope was a fragile thing, and Minra knew that the Vexthul was still very powerful. The hope of humans coming to help was better than no hope at all, but it was not a guarantee of survival. On Earth, the medical convoy was being prepared. Dr. Haiwan was leading a team of doctors and scientists who would travel to Corellian space to provide medical help to the survivors of the Vexthul attacks. The convoy was made up of 6 large ships filled with medicine, food, and humanitarian workers. Dr. Haiwan was excited about this mission. She believed that helping the Corellians was the right thing to do. She did not know that this decision would change everything. She did not know that the Vexthul, watching from the darkness of space, had seen these human ships preparing to leave Earth. She did not know that the Vex Thule had made a decision of their own, a decision that would force humanity to choose between staying safe and doing what was right. The medical convoy was traveling through empty space when the Vex Thule attacked. There was no warning. There was no chance to run or hide. The Vex Thule ships simply appeared on the sensors, and then the weapons began firing. Dr. HFY was in the main hospital section of the lead ship when the first explosion happened. The entire vessel shook violently, and medical equipment fell from shelves. She heard alarms sounding throughout the ship. Around her, the doctors and nurses began moving quickly, trying to help people who had been injured by the explosion. "What is happening?" Dr. HFY asked one of the ship's officers. The officer's face was very pale. "We are under attack. Vex Thule military ships have appeared from nowhere. They are firing on us." Dr. HFY felt her heart become very cold. This was not supposed to happen. This was a medical convoy. They were not soldiers. They were doctors and nurses and humanitarian workers. The Vex Thule would not attack an unarmed medical ship. But the Vex Thule did not care about these things. The Vex Thule saw humans, and they saw an enemy that was helping their target. That was enough. The attack lasted for only 13 minutes. The Vex Thule ships were heavily armed and built for destruction. The medical convoy ships had no weapons and no defenses. They were designed to help people, not to fight wars. When it was over, all 6 ships were destroyed. More than 247 humanitarian workers, doctors, and nurses were dead. Dr. HFY was among them. She had died trying to help an injured crew member escape from a burning room. The news reached Earth in a communication burst less than an hour later. The entire world seemed to stop. The Vex Thule had attacked an unarmed medical convoy. They had killed hundreds of innocent people who were only trying to help others. In the United Nations chamber, silence filled the room as officials read the reports. No one spoke. The information was too terrible for words. General Park Sung was the first to speak. When he did, his voice was cold and hard. "They killed our people. They killed unarmed civilians who were trying to help others. This changes everything." Minister Nari had tears streaming down her face. She had worked with Dr. HFY for many years. They had been friends. She could not accept that her friend was dead, killed in an attack on an innocent ship. "We need to respond," General Park Sung continued. "This is a declaration of war. The Vex Thule have chosen to attack us. Now we must choose how we will answer." Director Kwon, who had argued against helping the Corellians weeks earlier, sat with his head in his hands. He said nothing. There was nothing left for him to say. The vote was unanimous. The United Nations declared war on the Vex Thule Collective. Every nation on Earth would contribute to this war effort. Every factory, every scientist, every soldier would work toward one goal: to defeat the Vex Thule and drive them out of Corellian space. The response was immediate and total. It was as if someone had turned a switch, and the entire human civilization moved from peace to war in a single moment. Factories that had been making cars and computers and consumer goods were converted to military production. Scientists who had been working on space exploration and medicine redirected their efforts toward weapons development and military technology. Universities accelerated training programs for pilots and soldiers. Women and men lined up at recruitment offices, wanting to serve their country and wanting to help defeat this enemy. General Kyung-ho was brought in to lead humanity's military response. He was a man of 70 years old, tall and strong despite his age. He had retired from the military 10 years earlier, but he had come back when his country called him. He had the experience and the cold clarity of mind needed to lead a total war effort. Kyung-ho moved to the main military command center, and he immediately began planning. He looked at every ship that humanity had, every weapon, every trained soldier. He looked at the factories and the resources and the manpower. Then he made his decision. "We are going to build a fleet that the galaxy has never seen before," he said to his officers. "Not in size, but in power and in coordination. We are going to train soldiers like no soldiers have been trained before, and we are going to destroy the Vex Thul threat completely. I do not mean we will push them back. I do not mean we will negotiate peace. I mean they will be defeated so completely that they will never threaten anyone again. The work began immediately. Shipyards that had been closed began opening again. Old workers came back to their jobs. Young people moved to industrial cities to work building warships. Supply lines were organized with military precision. Every resource on Earth was dedicated to a single purpose. In space, Captain Jin Soo received orders to prepare for human military operations. He was told that a large human fleet would be arriving within 6 months. He was told to work with the Corellian command to plan the liberation of the conquered worlds. The Corellian people, who had been filled with despair just days earlier, suddenly felt hope. The death of the medical workers had awakened something in the human civilization. The humans were not going to stand aside and watch the Vex Thul destroy the Corellians. The humans were going to fight. Minra, in her underground cave on Koren 7, received a new message. This message was very different from the previous one. It said, "Prepare for liberation. A human military force will arrive to free our world. When you see human ships in the sky, your resistance must rise up and support them. We are coming to take back what the Vex Thul has stolen." Minra read this message to her resistance fighters, and they began to cry. Some were tears of sadness for their lost friends and family. Some were tears of happiness because they finally saw a future where the Vex Thul did not rule their world. "We will be ready," Minra said to her fighters. "When the humans come, we will fight beside them. We will take back our world." On Earth, Ambassador Jiwan was working on diplomatic relations with the freed species in the Vex Thul territory. The Corellians had told the humans that the Vex Thul had enslaved many other races. When humanity liberated the Corellians, these other species would also be free to fight for their own freedom. Jiwan began sending out diplomatic messages to these enslaved species. She told them that humanity was coming to help them. She told them that they could join an alliance of free species that would protect them and help them rebuild their worlds. The response was overwhelming. Species that had been enslaved for 100 years suddenly saw hope. They saw a chance to be free again. The 6-month period of preparation seemed to move both very quickly and very slowly. For the military workers and soldiers, each day brought new training and new preparations. For the political leaders and generals, each day brought planning and strategy. For the ordinary people of Earth, each day brought news of how the war effort was progressing. And on the worlds where the Vex Thul ruled, the enslaved peoples began to organize in secret. They received encrypted messages from both the Corellians and the humans. They prepared themselves for liberation. The time was coming. The greatest military operation in human history was about to begin. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light jump space at the edge of the Koren system, and it was a sight that would change everything. 847 warships, arranged in perfect military formation, filled the darkness of space with light and power. Behind them came support ships and transport vessels. The total force numbered more than 3,000 individual vessels. It was the largest military fleet that humanity had ever assembled. General Kyung Ho stood in the command center of the flagship, a massive warship called the Soul. His hands were clasped behind his back, and his old face was calm and focused. Next to him, Captain Jin Soo watched the screens that showed the approaching Vex Thul forces. This was the moment they had been training for. "The Vex Thul fleet is responding to our arrival," one of the officers reported. "They are moving to intercept us." "How many ships?" Kyung Ho asked. 235 warships, sir. They are old models, most of them. Not as advanced as we expected." A thin smile crossed Kyung Ho's face. The Vex Thul thought they were powerful. They thought their weapons were advanced enough to defeat any enemy. They had never fought against a civilization that could build ships faster than they could destroy them. "All fleet units, this is command," Kyung-ho spoke into the communication system. His voice was calm and steady. "We are going to defend Korin 7 and liberate the Corellian people. Remember your training. Remember why we are here. Fire when ready." The space around the Korin system became a storm of fire and death. Human weapons fired with accuracy that the Vexthul could not match. The Vexthul ships, designed to fight enemies with older technology, could not handle the human attacks. Ship after ship exploded or was disabled. The Vexthul fleet was being destroyed. But the Vexthul did not retreat immediately. They fought with a kind of brutal determination. They fired their weapons over and over, trying to hit the human ships. Some human ships were hit, some were damaged, some were destroyed. But for every human ship that was hit, 3 Vexthul ships were destroyed. The battle lasted for 6 hours of continuous fighting. It was the most intense military engagement that humanity had ever fought. Pilots pushed their fighter craft to the very limits of what they could do. Gunners on warships fired weapons until their hands were shaking. Commanders made decisions that determined whether their crews would live or die. When the fighting finally stopped, the Vexthul fleet was broken. The remaining ships retreated, moving away from the human force as quickly as they could. The humans had won the battle in space. But the real fight was only beginning. Captain Jin Soo led the ground forces down to the surface of Korin 7. Thousands of soldiers in combat armor descended from the sky in dropships. They had been trained for this specific mission, to liberate an occupied world from an enemy force. The Vexthul soldiers on the planet's surface were shocked. They had expected the Corellians to fight with small resistance forces. They had expected an easy victory. They had not expected to face an organized military force with modern weapons and advanced training. The human soldiers moved across the planet's surface like an unstoppable force. They liberated the labor camps where Corellian prisoners were being held. They freed families that had been separated. They took prisoners of their own and secured areas of the planet. Minra and her resistance fighters came out of the caves where they had been hiding. They had received the signal that the humans had arrived, and now it was time to fight openly. The resistance fighters, who had been harassing the Vexthul occupiers for months, now moved to full combat operations. The Vexthul soldiers, facing both organized human forces from above and resistance fighters on the ground, began to break. Some tried to retreat to their remaining ships. Some tried to fight to the last soldier. But their situation was hopeless. They were being defeated. Minra found herself fighting next to a young human soldier named Sung-ho. He was only 23 years old, but he fought with skill and courage. When a Vexthul soldier tried to attack Minra from behind, Sung-ho was there to help her. They fought together not as members of different species, but as allies fighting against a common enemy. After the battle, as they walked through the liberated camp, Sung-ho asked Minra if her family was among the prisoners. Minra shook her head. "I do not know. I have not found them yet." Sung-ho placed his hand on her shoulder, the way human soldiers did to show respect and sympathy. "We will help you find them. We will find everyone." Over the next 2 days, the human and Corellian forces secured the entire planet. The Vexthul occupiers who did not retreat were captured or killed. The prisoners were freed from the labor camps. The planet of Korin 7, which had been under Vexthul rule for 18 months, was liberated. Commander Teo arrived in a shuttle from the command ship in orbit. When he stepped onto the surface of his world, he fell to his knees. Around him, thousands of Corellian prisoners who had been freed were crying and celebrating. Some of them were crying because they were happy. Some were crying because they had lost family members. General Kyung-ho met Tayo in the main settlement. The human general was tall and strong, standing with the confidence of a man who had just won a major battle. "Commander, your world is free," Kyung-ho said. "But this is only the beginning. We have 16 more occupied worlds to liberate. We have a Vexthul military force that is still very dangerous. The war is not over. Teo looked at this human general with tears in his eyes. You did this. You actually came and fought for us. You actually liberated my world. We came because we had to come, Kyung-ho said simply. They attacked us. They killed our people. Now we are going to defeat them completely. This is a war, and we will see it through to the end. Captain Jin-Soo was already receiving intelligence reports about the locations of other occupied worlds. He was already planning the next attack. There was no time to celebrate victory. There was only the next battle. That evening, as the sun set over the liberated planet, Min-Ra finally found her family. Her parents and 2 younger brothers had survived the labor camps. When she saw them, she ran toward them, and they held each other, crying and laughing at the same time. Sung-ho, the young human soldier, watched from a distance. He understood that sometimes people needed to be alone with their families. He understood the depth of joy and sadness that Min-Ra was feeling at this moment. The victory on Korin 7 sent a message throughout the galaxy. The humans were not a species that could be defeated easily. The humans were not a species that would abandon their friends. When you attacked humanity, humanity did not run away. Humanity fought back with every resource and every soldier it had. In the darkness of space, other enslaved species heard about the liberation of Korin 7. They felt hope. They began to plan their own uprisings. They began to prepare for the day when the human and Corellian forces would come to free them. The war was far from over, but something had changed. The Vexthul, for the first time in 100 years, faced an enemy that was stronger than them. And they did not know how to respond to this new reality. The human and Corellian military forces moved through Vexthul space like a wave that could not be stopped. One world after another fell to the alliance. Each victory brought more confidence to the soldiers. Each victory brought more hope to the enslaved peoples. The pattern of each liberation was similar. The human fleet would arrive in a system and would defeat the Vexthul defenders in space. Then the ground forces would land and would secure the planet. The resistance fighters on the ground, who had been waiting in hiding for many months, would rise up and fight alongside the human soldiers. The Corellian people, who had started this war broken and defeated, were now becoming confident warriors. They were fighting to take back their own worlds. They were fighting for revenge against the species that had destroyed their civilization. In 6 months of continuous warfare, the human and Corellian alliance liberated 12 worlds. 7 other worlds were liberated by resistance fighters who rose up when they heard that the humans were coming. But the human military forces were not just fighting the Vexthul. As they liberated world after world, they discovered something terrible. The Vexthul had enslaved 17 different species. Beings of all shapes and sizes had been brought under Vexthul control. They had been forced to work in mines. They had been used for experiments. Some species had been nearly completely destroyed. A species called the Tren had once had a population of billions. Now only a few thousand remained. A species called the Zolian had been so completely enslaved that they had lost the ability to think for themselves. A species called the Orvik had been used as soldiers by the Vexthul and had been taught to love war and violence. When these enslaved species were freed by the human and Corellian forces, they had to be helped to understand that they were free. Many of them did not trust the humans at first. They had been taught that all other species were their enemies. But slowly, they began to understand that the humans and Corellians were different. They were liberators, not conquerors. Lieutenant Hai-Ji was a pilot of a human fighter ship called the Phantom. She was only 28 years old, but she had already become famous throughout the human military. Her mother had died in the attack on the medical convoy. Heiji had joined the military because of this loss, and she had poured all of her grief and anger into becoming an excellent pilot. In the Battle of the Zolian Cluster, Heiji shot down 17 Vex-Thul fighters in a single engagement. This was a record that made other pilots believe that she was maybe the greatest pilot in the human military. But Heiji did not fight because she wanted glory. She fought because she wanted revenge for her mother. After each battle, Heiji would talk to other pilots about what they had seen in the enslaved species worlds. She would tell them about the labor camps. She would tell them about the families that had been separated. She would tell them about the people who had been killed because they refused to obey Vex-Thul commands. "We are not just fighting to win," Heiji would say. "We are fighting to stop evil. That is why we can win. The Vex-Thul fight because they want power. We fight because we want to protect others. That makes us stronger." General Kyung-ho heard about Heiji and asked to meet her. When she came into his command office, he saw a young woman whose eyes carried both sadness and determination. "Your mother died in the attack on the medical convoy," Kyung-ho said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir," Heiji answered. "Dr. Hae-won. She was a great woman. She wanted to help people." Kyung-ho nodded slowly. "You honor her memory by fighting with skill and courage, but do not let anger make you careless. In war, the soldiers who survive are the ones who think clearly. Pride and anger make soldiers die." Heiji listened to this old general with respect. She understood that he was teaching her something important. Meanwhile, Captain Jin-soo was meeting with representatives from the enslaved species. They came to a conference room on the command ship to discuss what would happen after the Vex-Thul were defeated. A representative from the Tren species, a tall and dignified being named Vexor, spoke for all of them. "We do not know if we can trust any government. The Vex-Thul ruled us cruelly. We are afraid that your government will do the same thing." "We are not here to rule you," Jin-soo answered. "We are here to help you become free. After we defeat the Vex-Thul, you will choose your own government. You will choose how your societies will be organized. We will help you with resources and knowledge, but the choice will be yours." "Why would you do this?" another representative asked. "What do you gain from helping us?" Jin-soo thought about this question carefully. "When my people chose to help the Corellians, we chose to stand against evil. That was what we gained. We gained the knowledge that we had done the right thing, and we gained allies who will stand with us if we ever need help." Ambassador Ji-won was working on something similar at the diplomatic level. She was creating an alliance of free species. After the war, these species would work together to make sure that no power like the Vex-Thul Collective ever again enslaved innocent peoples. "We should call it the Alliance of Free Worlds," one diplomat suggested. "No," Ji-won said. "Let us call it the Alliance of Hope, because that is what we are building. We are building hope for the future." Back on Korin 7, Min-Ra was now serving as a military commander. She had been chosen by the Corellian leadership to lead the liberation forces on worlds that had once been Corellian colonies. She had seen so much death and suffering, but she had not stopped fighting. She could not stop fighting. Her people were counting on her. One day, Sung-ho, the young human soldier who had fought beside her on that first day of liberation, came to her military headquarters. He had been promoted to sergeant and now led his own squad of soldiers. "I wanted to tell you something," Sung-ho said. "The war is almost over. The Vex-Thul are pulling back to their central worlds. They are preparing for a final stand. When the war is finished, I am going to leave the military. I want to help rebuild the worlds that have been destroyed. I want to help people who have lost everything, like your people have." Min-Ra looked at this young man, who had shown her kindness in the midst of terrible war. She smiled for the first time in many months. "That is good. My world will need people like you. People who understand that life after war is as important as fighting the war." The grand strategy was becoming clear to everyone. General Kyung-ho was slowly pushing the Vexthul back toward their home system. With each battle, the human forces became stronger and more confident. With each battle, the Vexthul became weaker and more desperate. A report came that the Vexthul was gathering their remaining military forces at their home planet, a world called Vexkal. They were preparing for a final battle. They were preparing to either win and survive or to lose everything. General Kyung-ho received this report and nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "Let them gather there. We will meet them and we will finish this war." The Vexthul ruled through fear and violence for 100 years. Today, we are going to show the galaxy that fear and violence do not win against justice and courage. The human and Corellian forces began to move toward Vexkal. The enslaved species, now free and organized, contributed their own military forces. The Alliance of Hope was bringing its full strength to bear. The final battle was coming. The war that had started with a desperate plea for help was about to reach its conclusion.